Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 16th of June, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Mike Robinson with me in the studio. We'll also be joined by Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy using video link, and Diane is in the northeast of England. Well, for viewers that know UK Column and how we tackle the news, we often come in at a different direction. So whilst at the moment the world is looking at war and more war and carnage, of course, whether it's in Ukraine or it's in the Middle East, Israel, Gaza, and now, of course, with Iran, we are going to focus on something happening in UK. We think this is extremely important. It's to do with the grooming gangs. But before we get on to that, just a little bit of a summary of what we're going to cover overall, because we've got the grooming gangs and grooming as a whole. We're going to be having a look at what's been happening in Canada with Starmer-Carney. We're going to be taking a little look at Israel and UK-Israel relationships. And we're also going to be looking at the new head of MI6 and a bit on censorship. So a packed news today. Let's get started with grooming gangs, and what better place to start than Rachel Reeves talking about the issue.
All right. Last night, Prime Minister said that there would be a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. It's going to focus on the race of perpetrators. When do you expect that to start?
There will be the publication of the Casey review this week, and as the Prime Minister said yesterday, we want to get going with that as quickly as possible. Now, in the last year since we came to office, when we came to office, there were over 200 outstanding recommendations from the J review, which was a national inquiry which took 7 years. The previous government had not been implementing those. We've been cracking on and implementing those. Convictions are now at a record high, and the Prime Minister asked Louise Casey to do a rapid review to see what else we could do. She has said to make sure that these local inquiries that are up and running work properly, that we have a national inquiry alongside that, and we are accepting all of Louise Casey's recommendations, including that one.
Prime Minister says he's read Louise's report from cover to cover, read every word of it, and that has apparently changed his mind. What is in her report that we did not know before that justifies a change of heart?
Well, we'll see the report this week. I haven't yet had a copy of the report. Well, look, we'll see the report this week, but the Prime Minister is saying, even ahead of that he will accept all of her recommendations, including the need for a national inquiry to sit alongside those local inquiries that are already ready. But let me just say this, Trevor, because with local inquiries, they don't have the statutory powers, and we need to make sure that people are compelled to give evidence. And that's one of the reasons, because people are not coming forward to give that evidence.
So a bit of stuttering and some buts, but relax, because we've had 7 years worth of inquiry. We're going to do more inquiries. Those inquiries are going to produce what? Not a lot, probably, but we've got it all all in hand as a government, and you can relax. People aren't coming forward. Well, they're not coming forward because they've no confidence in the state, they've no confidence in the police, they've no confidence in social services. But apparently Rachel Reeves doesn't really get what's happening in the country. Let's just change the focus from those grooming gangs to other abuse that's going on in UK. I happened to pick this article from the BBC, particularly offensive. And this is about a 15-year-old girl, child queue strip search at her school by officers in Hackney after her teachers wrongly suspected her of carrying cannabis. This is the actual main part of the report. So she was basically stripped, including her underwear, had to bend over and expose intimate parts of her body while she was menstruating, the panel has heard. But apparently the police officers that conducted this disgraceful event didn't really understand that they were dealing with a child, and it didn't matter to them that there wasn't an adult to support that girl when this disgraceful strip search was taking place. Meanwhile, we've got the BBC that's suddenly become active on the subject of grooming gang survivors. So while the BBC largely silent about Jimmy Savile, certainly on the Holly Gregg case, and hundreds of child stealing by the state, suddenly now we've got grooming gangs. The survivors are going to be interviewed by the BBC. We'll talk in a bit about why we're interested in this change of heart with the BBC. Here's the BBC also spinning a story which was about Operation Midland. So we've got Liam Britton's widow here saying that she's got no closure after false abuse claims were made in that case by Carl Beach. But when we get into the article, something's really interesting because misconduct proceedings against the Met Police investigating officer Steve Rodhouse, who was the lead for Operation Midland, have been quietly dropped. So you're led to believe that basically this is really bad because the police have dropped an investigation into their own man. You get a bit more when you go into the story. In a surprise announcement last week, the Independent Office for Police Conduct said it was stopping the proceedings after a large volume of relevant material was recently disclosed to it by the Met Police. Now, I'm just going to say here that the BBC is failing to investigate and reveal to the public just what that relevant material was. We need to know because sources that have been informing the UK column assure us this is more detailed information of abuse of children within that overall remit of Operation Midland. The BBC so far not asking to see that material to understand why the investigation against that officer was dropped. Let's have a listen to Dominic Cummings talking recently on the subject of grooming gangs and child abuse.
So obviously all over Whitehall there was mass cover-ups of the whole thing for the same reason that we've already alluded to, fear. Fear of the political consequences of facing reality. What I saw in 2011, I mean, there are lots of different things. Well, normally in Whitehall, the cliche that it's a cock-up, not a conspiracy, is generally true. The one big exception, I would say, is regarding child abuse, where there are actually multiple conspiracies constantly and largely successful. I watched these happening repeatedly in the Department of Education because the issue was parked there by Gordon Brown and Ed Balls, so I had to deal with it when I was there. I would watch the redacted documents and the actual unredacted documents about lots of these cases, and you could see that the redacted documents are redacted entirely to hide the incompetence of the system. Now, what happened on the gangs is that when Andrew Norfolk at the time started to try to report the issue, the council went to officials inside the Department of Education and said, we want to bring a judicial review to have the courts suppress the Times' reporting and not allow it to happen. Some of the officials inside the DfE, who routinely organised cover-ups on such issues, were of course very in favour of it. But there were another set of officials inside DfE who agreed with me that this was absolutely appalling, and in fact we should do the opposite. So what we ended up doing was saying to Michael Gove, you should write to the council and say that if you bring this judicial review, we will actually appear in court on behalf of the Times, not on behalf of you. That obviously blew up the judicial review attempt by the council to keep it secret, and then Norfolk could publish his piece in the Times. Unfortunately, I think Norfolk died recently without even knowing that this ever even happened. But that's just one small example of something which happened many, many times on this subject over a few decades in Whitehall, which is, of course, why the system is absolutely desperate not to have an inquiry. It's only bizarre if you believe the old ideas about how the system works. It's not bizarre once you realise that the people there are not operating on the incentives or with the values that you think they are. It's actually completely standard and completely normal and completely unsurprising.
Okay.
So, Mike, we had a bit of a discussion about this prior to the news. I said, I think what we're watching is a diversion. This has been blown up to keep public attention in UK on the grooming gangs and divert attention away from the Middle East. You thought something more serious was happening.
Well, I think this is a deliberate attempt to incite feeling within the country and to effectively bring people out onto the streets.
Destabilisation.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking I'm talking about the timing of it more than anything else.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So a lot to be discussed on this. But is Cummings, does he really believe that it was all just cock up in Parliament? I don't think he's that naive. Let's have a look at this very short clip, which we've shown many times before, and see what it says about the political system as a whole.
Anyone with any sense who was in trouble would come to the whips and tell them the truth and say, no, I'm in a jam, can you help? It might be debt, it might be scandal involving small boys, or any kind of scandal which a member seemed likely to be mixed up in. They'd come and ask if we could help. And if we could, we did. And we would do everything we can, because we would store up brownie points. That sounds a pretty nasty reason, but it's one of the reasons. Is if we can get a chap out of trouble, then he'll do as we ask forevermore.
So here's the reality: blackmailing MPs, covering up the abuse of children so they would do as the politicians wanted evermore. This is the reality. Grooming gangs is a minor subset, but I totally agree, Mike. This is about destabilising the country. So strife overseas, strife in UK.
And just to clarify that, we need to very strongly make the point that when Brian says this is a minor subset, he is talking about in terms of the scale of the event. Obviously, for the people involved in the grooming gangs issue itself, it is absolutely a major, and we're not attempting to downplay that in any way. It is. Absolutely. We're talking about it within the context of the overall abuse system, and it's been going on for generations.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Mike. Absolutely right. Diane, let's bring you in, because, of course, while child abuse is covered up here in England, south of the border, north of the border, we have Fornethy case that UK column has been reporting. Hundreds, thousands possibly of women abused over a great many years. And what can you tell us about reactions by the Scottish Parliament?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Brian. And hello, Mike. It's great to be here today. I just wanted to basically cover this story today in particular because it goes along with this overall story that we're covering around inquiries and child abuse and cover-ups. And it just so happens that last Thursday, this debate was finally on the floor of the Scottish Parliament, which was a very long time coming after 3 years of the petition for the Fornethy Residential School abuse survivors fighting for justice and inclusion in the Scottish Abuse Inquiry Redress Scheme. So since 2022, we've been fighting this. UK column has been covering this for a number of years. They've been denied justice according to the redress scheme because they don't meet the criteria, because they weren't abused for long enough, meaning that they were only abused for 6 weeks at a time, or that possibly because they were calling it a holiday camp or a convalescent camp or something like that, and none of that was true. So let's start by watching a few video clips here. Colin Smith was the person in Parliament who raised this, but for his constituent, and he called this justice for the Fornethy survivors. So here's a clip from his opening remarks.
There's another one before the committee, petition PA 1979, but once again the government dismiss it. Dismiss its call for an independent national whistleblowing office for children and education services. Dismiss its call for independent investigations into unresolved allegations. Dismiss its call to close gaps in the child abuse inquiry. Whistleblowers ignored, victims ignored, public bodies protected. That's the reality of child protection in Scotland today. Presiding Officer, the tragic human cost of child abuse is incalculable. The lost childhoods, the lasting trauma. As a society, nothing should be more important than safeguarding our children. But for Fornethy, countless other failures by the state expose the brutal truth. We are failing victims again and again, every single day.
And another person who did an excellent job of covering what was going on was Fergus Ewing, MSP, who is on the petitions committee, and he has been part of the petitions committee, which they have been in unanimous agreement for over a year now that this needed to go further. So this is quite a powerful clip from Fergus Ewing.
That this is a palpable, egregious, serious injustice caused to the most innocent girls in the country over a sustained period of over 30 years, for several weeks at a time, has still not been redressed by either the Glasgow Corporation or the Scottish Government. Now, I think the Scottish Government must take the lead. We must accept the responsibility to do that. How it is done is a mere detail. If it requires legislative reform, that must be done. If it requires an executive direction to redress Scotland, that must be done. We cannot hide behind legalistic arguments. The idea that these children were put there for a holiday or respite care, what an insult. But it's also, as well as an insult, factually wrong. Fornethy is a residential school. The corporation advertised for teachers. What do teachers do? They teach in schools. So that argument is just an insult to the victims. It is platitudinous, pedantic, nitpicking, legalistic, and I don't think one moment that the current Deputy First Minister would seek to invoke or stand behind that argument. The other argument, as Mr Smith has said, is that they did not cease to be under parental control. Are they really saying that the parents consented to the abuse that their children have suffered? What arrant nonsense. What an absurd argument. The indisputable fact is that these girls were sent there by Glasgow Corporation. Glasgow Corporation owned the school. They are part of the state. The state is responsible for the abuse. The abuse that...
Now, what I would like to say about what he just said was that was a direct result of the evidence that I collected after spending days and hours, countless times, Mitchell Library in Glasgow, in the National Records of Scotland, and so on. And I want to credit him again, because if we go back to March 2024, when I was cited back in the Petitions Committee, let's play that short clip from Mr. Ewing.
Thanks, Convener. We're indebted to Professor Dan McCarry for a submission of the 11th of March 2024, and just reading therefrom, she states, the purpose of redress for historical institutional child abuse should be to benefit survivors. Currently, the eligibility guidelines specifically exclude survivors of short-term residential school abuse. This is unjust.
So this weekend, I caught up with some of the survivors, particular Lynn Sheeran and Sharon Cruden, who have been interviewed by Brian previously as part of our series on the interviews with some of the survivors. And I wanted to get their thoughts on what they thought around what happened, because they were in the gallery on Thursday. So let's play their thoughts here just a minute, please.
I think that more MSPs could have sat and stayed and listened to the debate. The fact that the majority, them all stood up after First Minister's questions and left was actually embarrassing. To think that not so long back there, most of them were saying that they stand by us and they'll help us, and we'll fight for justice and we'll fight for redress. And it was shocking to see them getting up and leaving their seats. And the few that did stay, fantastic. We appreciate your support immensely. But I just wish that more of them would have followed through with what they told us a few months back, that they would help us. And that in itself was quite downheartening.
And Sharon, what did you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with Lynn. The fact that all these women had made their way down to Edinburgh for this debate and just totally slapped us in the face by doing that. I mean, we can understand that some of them have got other meetings to go to and work to do and stuff like that, but not everyone. Just have a bit of compassion and hear it out at least
Yeah.
And if they make a contribution into a speech of some sort, that's great in our favour. We need everybody on board here for support. But just getting up and walking out was just an absolute embarrassment at the end of the day.
Yep.
So I think this is an appropriate time to point out a couple of screenshots that I took from the recording of the debate. So if we can pull this slide up on the screen, this was First Minister's questions, which happened immediately before the Fornethy debate. Then there was a short pause. They stopped the video recording, and then we came back about 3 minutes later. And what did we see? Just very few MSPs alone by themselves. I think there were maybe 5 total in the entire floor. That's Kate Forbes standing there by herself. And what I would like to do is call out the people who did stay and contribute. So, of course, Colin Smith, Alex Cole-Hamilton, those two were together at Fornethy. They went to Fornethy with the women a couple of years ago on a trip. So they know firsthand exactly what it was like. Of course, Fergus Ewing, who we just heard from, Maurice Golden and Faisal Chowdhury, Maggie Chapman, Monica Lennon. So they all spoke in favor of the women. And then, of course, we heard from Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes. And it's always been the First Minister or the Deputy First Minister for the last few years who have been the ones denying the justice and saying, well, these are the reasons why we can't do it. So if we can just put Kate up here on the screen for just a minute. Here's what she had to say, that she did commit to continuing close engagement with survivors, engage directly with Glasgow City Council because they do have a direct responsibility for what happened to the women, look at how we could provide greater levels of emotional support, see whether the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry would cover Fornethy itself. And she actually said, in pursuit of the truth. So what I see in her language is lots of empty promises that, oh, we're going to talk, we're going to engage, we're going to listen, we're going to see. She talked about how they will be included in phase 10 of the inquiry, which is going to be looking at the provision of residential care for children in establishments run by local authorities, as Fornethy was. And what's very disappointing as well is that not only were they not remaining in the chamber for the debate, but we also saw very little press coverage of it. We did see here on the 12th of June, which was the day that the debate happened, a statement from Alex Cole-Hamilton's office, who's been supporting the bill along with Colin Smith, saying that we need to open this up to the survivors. And we saw one other article in mainstream media on the Daily Record, which came out over the weekend, which featured Lynn Sheeran herself, who we just heard from. But that is all we have seen. So UK Column has been covering this from the beginning, and we will continue to do so until the women get the justice that they deserve, Mike and Brian.
Diane, just one final question. If we could, how many women does this affect for anybody that hasn't been following this story?
Well, the school was open between 1960 and 1991. The women were there for 6 weeks at a time, and some of them went more than once. So we could potentially calculate thousands and thousands of women that were affected. And we've had maybe stories from about 200 women who are been in the survivor group, but we know that there's many, many more. And so the campaign has involved getting women to speak out if they were there and maybe not even aware that this is going on because of the cover up, because of the fact that it's not being provided anywhere except by us. And we will continue to do so. So we need everyone to spread the word to get more Glaswegian women who were abused at Fornethy to come forward.
Okay, Diane, thank you for that. Well, I'm just going to reinforce this business of massive cover-up across governments of child abuse. And of course, if our government is prepared to cover up wide-scale abuse of children, whether it's grooming gangs or it's in residential homes or foster homes for children, or it's north of the border, Fornethy, if the government is prepared to do this, of course, the government is capable of anything, and that includes prosecuting malicious proxy wars overseas. But the point UK Column is making here today is we have a vicious attack on our own society, our own families, not in ones and twos. This is happening on a huge scale, and the government is covering up that abuse. Now, we are looking at the country and saying this is to provoke unrest and violence in this country. And unrest and violence in this country is going to be a critical issue over and above what is happening overseas on distant shores. So let's reinforce this. This is just a few quotes from the Wood Report, sector expert review of the new multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. This is back in May 2021. So this was the headline from Community Care. Social work isn't social work isn't falling to bits. It has some deep challenges to which we can provide remedies. And if we get into this, I've only taken a little bit of it, but it's the usual platitudes. The resources for protecting children are under much stress. The recruitment and retention and safeguarding professionals remains a challenge across the three statutory agencies. We just can't get the right people. It goes on. The report estimates the current shortfall in children's social care budgets is 824 million. We can't get to grips with protecting children unless another 824 million are slapped on the table, but it's the money circulating around abused children which is funding the whole child abuse industry in UK. People have got to start to understand what's happening here, because it is the government and its agencies, committees, and those conducting reports who are wittingly or unknowingly contributing to the covering up of abuse. Let's just continue through. So the report went on and it said that Whitehall departments need to demonstrate more effectively a culture of joined up working to support local implementation of the new arrangements to support their full potential to further improve the safeguarding of children. You can't further improve it because what we've got is the abuse of children on a massive scale, producing income for a vast number of people being covered up by the government. This is about joined up thinking, which is actually allowing criminal activity. I'm describing it here as part of an orchestrated, protected, abusive, multi-agency cabal. And if we look at this final comment, it's talking about the leadership of the multi-agency arrangements. And of course, this is where the problem really lies, because there's no separation of powers. We've got local authorities, we've got clinical commissioning groups, and we've got the police all working together in partnership. So the moment we have abusers operating in the system through the local authority, for example, the local police are already implicated because they are not watching from a distance to uphold law. They are in partnership with the authorities abusing the children. So this is the nub of the matter. It's a national club with no separation of powers. And even so, this could not operate without the facilitation of the family courts, which hide the abuse within secret courts. So if you want some further proof here, we could jump to Australia. This is back to 1997, when an investigation and a report came out which was called Breaking the Code of Silence. And this was about corruption and cover-up, particularly of child abuse in New South Wales in Australia. So UK column today, absolutely pushing, before we start worrying about what's happening overseas, let's have a look at what is happening in UK. And to our mind, we are being attacked by our own government, which is desperate to get social breakdown, because if that can be achieved, these new policies and control structures are going to come into post. Meanwhile, Mike, our illustrious leader, Keir Starmer, is out of the country, having set the dogs running over grooming gangs. What's he up to in Canada?
Well, he's committing carnage. Now, yesterday, as Brian says, Keir Starmer met with Mark Carney in Toronto, in the west of, in the mountains in the west of the country. Now, they began by discussing what they described as the grave situation in the Middle East. And they said that this was with a view to de-escalation. I think probably not. They claim to have had a warm and productive conversation about Britain and Canada's future relationship. Carney confirmed that Canada would ratify the UK's accession to the Comprehensive Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership in the autumn. So that's this massive Pacific trade deal. And they agreed to set up what they described as a joint task force to, quote, turbocharge progress on other areas of mutual benefit, unquote. So let's have a quick look at what they were talking about. So trade and semiconductors was at the top of the list. But aside from that, they announced quantum to develop secure transatlantic communications based on quantum technologies. That's because the Chinese have done this first, so they've decided they want to get on this bandwagon, allowing us to connect our national systems and lay the groundwork to create a truly global next generation network with application across our financial and telecoms sectors. Does that make you feel good, Brian?
No.
Good. The next one on the list is digital. And they said that this was to mutually reinforce nation-building digital public infrastructure. So that's fantastic too. Next came artificial intelligence, which is, they say, all about deepening and exploring new collaborations on frontier AI systems to support our national security. So this is actually about national security. It's not about anything else. They mentioned an organization, a company called Cohere, which is the Canada-based Google-founded AI startup, which both Canada and the UK have memoranda of understanding with. They then talked about biomanufacturing, which is all about strengthening collaboration to deliver economic growth and be better prepared for future health emergencies. So they're sticking with the policy agendas as hard as they can here. Critical minerals, again, attempting to sideline China. So this is all about finding them, mining them, and so on, and all about infrastructure, production and processing capabilities. And they had a whole section on enhanced defense and security, including continued support for Ukraine, of course, intelligence sharing, cybersecurity, and border security. Now, this was all done in the run-up to the G7 meeting, which also began yesterday in the Canadian Rockies. This is not going to be the usual formality this time. There'll be no joint communique. There'll be fewer roundtable meetings in favour of one-on-one meetings. All, at least as far as the mainstream press is concerned, to get some consensus for what comes next. There are going to be extra attendees there with leaders from, well, Modi is coming from India. There's going to be leaders from Brazil. Zelensky is going to be there from Ukraine. There's going to be people there from Australia and from Saudi Arabia. Mark Rutte and Antonio Guterres are due to be there as well. The mainstream media is presenting this idea of no communique and all the rest as being an effort to avoid Trump getting in the way of things. And we shouldn't forget Ursula von der Leyen, because she'll be there. And of course, her main priority is consensus to maintain pressure on Russia. And she said that last week we put forward a proposal for an 18 sanctions package. I invite all G7 leaders, partners, to join us in this endeavour. And of course, that's because that's worked so far, hasn't it? Now, the summit was supposed to be about protecting our communities and the world, building energy security and accelerating the digital transition, and securing the partnerships of the future. Well, that's all been abandoned in favour of this war, of course. So, as I say, Zelensky making a celebrity appearance. As I mentioned, war with Trump over tariffs and also war with Iran. Now, while we mention Iran, the Starmer regime decided to send more aircraft to the Middle East to support Israel. Starmer has said that he sent Typhoons and air-to-air refuelers, quotes, for contingency support across the region. Does that sound likely to you?
No.
No. I mean, there's not much more to say, is there? Because it's much more than contingency support. But anyway,
yeah.
I'm going to say thanks to Patrick for sending this over to me. We've got a short video clip of former British diplomat Karen Ross, who made a statement on this. Now, if you don't know who he was, he resigned from the Foreign Office after the Iraq War. But let's have a listen to what he said about this deployment to the Middle East from Starmer.
Hi, I'm Karen Ross. I was head of Middle East policy at the UK mission to the UN. I was also head of the Israel-Palestine desk in the British Foreign Office. Keir Starmer has just decided to send British military assets to the Middle East, presumably to join the Israel-Iran conflict on Israel's side. Couple of things about this. First of all, Israel's attack on Iran was illegal under international law. It is not legal under the UN Charter to attack other countries unless you yourself have been attacked, i.e. self-defense, and Israel was not attacked. Secondly, to join a conflict, i.e. expand the number of countries who are part of that conflict, is of course escalatory. Starmer has repeatedly said he wants to de-escalate the conflict. Actions speak louder than words. Britain is contributing to the escalation of the Iran-Israel conflict. Thirdly, of course, we shouldn't forget Gaza. The UK government, under Starmer, is complicit in Israel's commission of war crimes in Gaza, and perhaps even genocide by the deliberate starvation of the Palestinian population. There should be a public inquiry into this complicity.
Now, the only thing that I might challenge him on there is the idea of a public inquiry, because as we're making the point today, these things have a tendency to be there in order to cover up more than anything else. But I don't know if you've got any thoughts on what he said.
Well, I think it's obvious. Something that I saw at the end of last week was that one of the key spokesmen for Labour Friends of Israel was actually saying that Netanyahu's position was untenable and he should be removed. So I think there is dissent in the Labour Party, but of course Keir Starmer has installed himself as a dictator, really, Mike, which is the key part of the problem. Okay, let's just have a break from Israel for a moment. And what do we want to say to our audience? A huge thank you to everybody who's recently joined up as a member. Utterly brilliant. We've had a number of people joining us over the last few weeks. We've had donations, some quite generous donations, and we've had some lovely letters and emails telling UK Column how much you appreciate what we do. This is such a huge boost to us. But if you're watching in UK or you're elsewhere in the world and you're not yet a member, then please go and visit the website. And this is the area you need to go to. Click here to support our work. And of course, that'll lead you through how to join as a member for a monthly donation or annual, or you can take out a lifetime membership or buy something from the shop. Bottom left on screen, I love CO2. What a sensible thing that is. And those badges, very popular. Visit the UK Column shop if you'd like to purchase one of those. But overall, I want to say that huge amount of material on the UK Column website, often more than we can keep up with. But do visit, have a look. Share the articles and please promote the column, because it's your financial support that keeps us going. So if you're not a member and you like what we're doing, please sign up and not only help us keep going, help us expand. Now, we have been asked for more details on the UK Column on location in York. We're going to tease you at the moment because we're going to keep exactly what we're going to do under wraps for a little while longer. But suffice to say, this is a fantastic location. So the event will be on Saturday, the 18th of October. We're very much looking for a full house, because if we can achieve that, then we are absolutely dedicated to give you what you've all been asking us for, which is a weekend event on the 20th anniversary of UK Column in 2026. So watch out for more details on this really good event. Now, I got summoned for an interview by Ben Rubin a few days ago. There was a lot happening with the UK Column studio. So Ben wisely said, let's go on to Dartmoor in the rain and the mist and the clag, where I will interview you. So we had an informal chat. I was interrogated by Ben Rubin, and we covered a lot of information in quite an interesting environment. So join us for that. That'll be going out at 1:00 tomorrow. Now, Diane, you've also flagged up the Scottish People's COVID-19 Inquiry Conference. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So this is a reflection by Professor Richard Ennos, who's the chair of Common Knowledge Edinburgh, who organized this event, which we held back in February. I'm also on the executive committee for Common Knowledge Edinburgh, and I spoke on the media lies and the media campaign that went on at the time in 2020. And I just want to say that one of the most important things that he highlights in this article, which will be part of the series, we've got all of the talks from the conference from other people as well who spoke on the day, and including the statistics that actually proved, according to the information itself that in Scotland, there was no pandemic and there was no COVID as we were told that there was. So there's some very important information in those videos, and I would urge everyone to watch them and share those as well. These thoughts from Professor Enos are very, very interesting. And the next questions that we need to be answering, as he says in the article, is who needs to be held to account to what happened in Scotland and, of course, around the world, and what do we do about it?
Excellent. Thank you for that. Also tonight, we've got Germ Warfare going out. What happened to journalism with Lara Logan. That's at 7:00. Really interesting series, and Germ doing some really good work with UK columns. So if you haven't seen any of that before, log in tonight at 7. And also we want to remind people that June 26th to the 29th is the Sounds Beautiful Festival in Wimborne, Dorset, and we will see you there. More details on that in the coming days. Now, where do we want to go now? Well, let's reconvene with the subject of Israel. So we have, Rachel Reeves talking about UK's involvement in this whole disastrous affair. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Well, exactly. But as a point of principle, and I understand you don't want to talk about anything operational, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. But as a point of principle, we are allies to the Israelis, and there could be a situation here where we are asked to deploy assets in their support, and we would have to consider that, wouldn't we?
Well, what we've done in the past, as you know, Trevor, is help protect Israel from incoming strikes, so a defensive activity.
So I'm just simply...
I'm not going to rule anything out at this stage, Trevor. It's a fast-moving situation, a very volatile situation, but we don't want to see escalation. We want to see de-escalation because it's a very volatile part of the world. And of course, what happens in the Middle East, as we know, often has repercussions around the world. We've already seen in the last few days, for example, oil and gas prices begin to go up. That has consequences for people here in the UK. And so we do have an interest in de-escalation in the region, and that is what we are urging.
But just one final thing on the issue of Iran and Israel. The Israelis have made it pretty clear that part of what they want is regime change in Tehran. Do we support that?
Well, I've got no time for the Iranian regime, for the repression of their own people. And we have serious concerns, which we've expressed on a number of occasions, about the Iranian nuclear program. But we want to see de-escalation at the moment. We are not trying to ramp up the rhetoric. We are very concerned about the developments in the Middle East because of the implications here at home, but also the implications for the Middle East.
Just an incredible interview overall because of the things that she didn't say, the weasel wording. So we've been providing intelligence material to Israel, which has clearly allowed Israel to conduct its aggressive attacks on Iran. She's trying to sell that as defensive. We're apparently putting jet aircraft out in the Middle East in order to, quote, protect our people. I'm not sure how that works. So, Mike, it's truly obscene what the British politicians are doing at the moment, because they're helping to foment these wars overseas and then holding up their hands. It was nothing to do with us. But she did admit what the UK government is really after, and that is regime change in Iran. We don't like the government of Iran, therefore they need to be removed. But of course, many countries in the world say we don't like the government of UK, we'd rather they were removed. But we can't have that stance because, of course, it's only the British government and the Western governments which are right. The hypocrisy, Mike, is breathtaking.
Absolutely off the charts.
Off the charts. And I'd like just to remind us, our audience, the UK column for a very long time, this goes back to 2011, was warning about David Cameron's personal stance on Israel. He was to be quoted saying that basically his allegiance to Israel was unshakable, and we pointed out that meant automatically that UK came second, and I believe that that is actually absolutely the case. But of course, he didn't just talk the language, he went and walked the walk. Let's have a listen to have a look at this little clip from Middle East Eye that was talking about what Cameron's been up to.
But while the US and Israel have long rejected the International Court's authority and are not signatories of the Rome Statute, the UK is, and is bound by the court's decision to arrest the Israeli leaders. Yet, according to former staff working at the ICC prosecutor's office, David Cameron warned Karim Khan that the UK would withdraw from the ICC and defund the court if it was forced to make that decision. In a heated phone call, Cameron reportedly told Khan that going ahead with the arrest warrants would be like dropping a hydrogen bomb, and that it would make the ICC look like it was losing the plot. Khan responded to Cameron's threats of withdrawing from the Rome Statute, saying that if it were to occur, then it would have to accept that the rules-based system would be dead. Cameron replied, saying that Khan was making a huge mistake and that the world was not ready for this. A month later, Karim Khan went ahead with the charges, indicating that then unknown figures had attempted to intimidate him and his team.
And we just add to that, of course, the US has actually taken out sanctions against him and other members of the International Court in order to bully and threaten them into silence. So who is our government working for? Is it the population of UK, or is it an overseas power that at the moment is demonstrating it can be particularly aggressive? Should we be looking to our intelligence services to help calm down the situation?
Oh,
Mike?
absolutely. Let's just look at where we are with that. So Keir Starmer announced yesterday that Blaise Metrovelli, CMG, is going to be the first ever female chief of the Security Intelligence Service. She becomes the 18th chief of the organization's in the organization's history, and of course known as C. So she has operational responsibility, or she will have very shortly, for MI6, and is the only publicly named member of that organization. Now, she will supposedly be accountable to the Foreign Secretary. She's currently Director General of Q Branch, responsible for technology and innovation in MI6, and has previously held a director-level role in MI5. And she succeeds the Bilderberg attendee, Sir Richard Moore, who leaves the service towards the autumn. So what do we know about her? Let's see. She's a 47-year-old. She's a career intelligence officer who joined the Secret Intelligence Service in 1999. She served as Second Secretary Political in Basra in 2004, which puts her right in the heart of the Blair regime, and of course linked therefore to the Iraq War. And then last January, she was an attendee at this event at the Ditchley Foundation on transforming democracy, all about how so-called democratic states can best use AI and thrive. She's listed in the conference summary as Director General Tech and Innovation at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, interestingly enough, because of course they didn't want to identify her as MI6 at that time. Now, you can watch last Friday's news programme for a report by Mark Anderson on the Ditchley Foundation. So she was made Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George last year. So let's just have a quick look at what she said when she was given this job. Here she is. I am proud and honoured to be asked to lead my service. MI6 plays a vital role with MI5 and GCHQ in keeping the British people safe and promoting UK interests overseas. Which of those two do you think is the highest priority?
I would suspect, Mike, it's UK interests overseas overwhelmingly.
Yes. But this narrative about keeping people safe keeps coming back, of course. She went on to say, I look forward to continuing that work alongside the brave officers and agents of MI6 and our many international partners. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, our international partners, I'm going to say straight away, includes Israel right the way across the intelligence field. We're embedded with Israel and have been since Francis Maud, Conservative MP, announced this to the nation. We're in partnership with Israel. We are an ally of Israel, never debated in the House as far as I know, and she's going to work presumably to promote Israel's interests. I may be a bit hard here, Mike, but I think reality is coming to the surface.
Well, I think it's fascinating that she began her career effectively under Richard Dearlove and was subsequently posted to Iraq immediately after the Iraq War. So she was part of that cabal and clearly not going to be doing anything to de-escalate any events in Ukraine or the Middle East, I would say.
No, because British interests lie in destabilising these areas and regime change so that the natural assets can be raped. That is the meat of it. And Theresa May, of course, several years ago was obviously talking about a sort of Operation Barbarossa 2025 in the UK being able to get its hands on the resources in Ukraine. So it's pretty obvious what's going on. And I, for one, would say that to me, our secret intelligence services and security services are not protecting the nation state in any shape or form. She has got nice hair, though.
Okay. Let's move on with that comment.
Well, we better. Well, of course, alongside with a state dictatorship comes censorship. So, Diane, you've been absolutely taking the lid off how censorship is working across the country, and also, of course, how the library and the educational system is being used to groom particularly children and young people. What have you got for us?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So last week I was in Buckingham at the University of Buckingham doing a talk that I was invited to present by Professor Dennis Hayes, who is the Director of Academics for Academic Freedom, and I've interviewed him previously on UK Column. This was called In Defense of Libraries, and I added the subtitle, They're Burning Books Again, because they actually are. And I just wanted to thank everyone who came out to see my talk. We had a mix of friends of the University of Buckingham, as well as members of UK Column, and in some cases, some drove as far as 80 miles away to come see me. So what's actually happening here is what I realized is hypocrisy, and this came out of some of the discussion that happened as a result of UK Column members asking me questions after the end of my talk. And what I want to talk about is, as people know that have watched me previously, talking about the sexualization of children when it comes to the library content that's been being provided to children as young as primary school age, which of course includes as young as children in kindergarten, so 5-year-olds. One thing that's important to note is that no books are actually censored or banned in the UK or in America, but the librarians both in the UK and in America under the American Library Association, as well as here the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, which sort of booted me out of my profession originally, they are basically saying that we have to put this in front of children because it's inclusive, it's diverse, and so they need to see these things. So just as a reminder, here's a couple of examples. We have, for example, In My Daddy's Belly. This was a book that says it's the story of a transgender dad giving birth, obviously meant for young children. So how confusing is that going to be? Another really shocking example is there's basically a glossary in a book that's called This Book is Gay. And you can look at this glossary yourself and you can see that, for at least for me, there are words that were defined that I've never even heard of myself. And this has also been found in primary schools in the libraries throughout the West. If parents want to do this for their children, that's fine. But the issue is that the state is putting it in front of their children without the knowledge of the parents, because the parents aren't being told what they're being provided in school. This, as we know from work done by Hugh McCarthy, which has been published on UK Column in recent times, this is actually happening according to guidance provided by globalist organizations such as the UN and the World Health Organization, which states that children are sexual beings from birth and therefore should be exposed to this content. On the other hand, university and national libraries are actually censoring, and they call it decolonizing. But actually what it means is that they are destroying library collections and catalogs. So I have just a short clip here from the University of Leeds Library, just as an example of how they define decolonization in the library.
A question that's often asked is, What does it mean to decolonize the library?
So here's a video to explain what that means.
First, let's start with the definition. To decolonize something is to identify, challenge, and revise or replace assumptions, ideas, values, and practices that reflect a colonizer's dominating influence, and especially a Eurocentric dominating influence. But why does decolonization matter to the library?
Decolonizing the library encourages students and staff to challenge unconscious biases that have been formed by a fixation on Eurocentric perspectives, narratives, and knowledge systems. Put simply,
so that, again, is the University of Leeds. That is on YouTube if you want to see the entire video. So what we're seeing is that British, Western European, so-called Eurocentric content, it needs to be moved aside in British libraries to make room for the prioritization of content that is not British, Western, European. So I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with adding different voices from different countries and different perspectives from around the world. But what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that academics in this country are experiencing that some of their long-standing materials, basic textbooks, research materials, are being removed from the library by the librarians, from the catalog and from the collection without the knowledge or any discussion from the academics. And that, to me, is censorship. So when we combine that with the fact that librarians are pushing sexualization materials in front of primary school children, and that they're removing materials from university-age people who are of consent, who, in my opinion, can read anything they want to, I just find it's just a staggering example of hypocrisy of what the librarians and library associations are doing to readers.
Thank you, Diane, for that. Now, Brian, we're going to related censorship topic, but I want to bring this on screen. This is Kitchen Counter blog from blogger Alistair Kitchen. You'll find it on Substack. Now, he was detained last week upon arrival at Los Angeles airport and deported back to Melbourne, where he lives, having been held in custody for 12 hours. He says that the United States border officials told him it was because of what he has written in the past on pro-Palestine protests by university students in the United States. He said he left Melbourne on Thursday, bound for New York, and was stopped and interrogated by US Customs and Border Protection officials during his stopover in Los Angeles. And he said he was clearly targeted for politically motivated reasons. And he said that the staff there spent 30 minutes questioning about his views on Israel and Palestine, including his thoughts on Hamas. Now, this is very similar behaviour to that of the British counterterrorism police at British airports, except, of course, in the cases that we're aware of, at least people weren't deported afterwards because they were mainly British people. But anyway, I've got to mention that they were waiting for me when I got off the plane in New York recently, not with the same outcome. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in extra. But anyway, getting back to Kitchen, he said he had cleaned up his online presence, expecting ad hoc digital sweeps before he went on holiday or to the trip to New York, but he was not prepared for their sophistication. And because it didn't matter that he had cleared his digital profile. In the meantime, they had clearly historical information. And he is alleging that this sophisticated approach from them was almost certainly facilitated by Palantir. And he has said that if you're deleting social media 48 hours before your flight to the United States, it's already too late. He said that his phone contents were immediately downloaded on threat of deportation, but that in retrospect, he should have denied the search and accepted immediate deportation. He said that in general, he was too compliant, too trusting, and too hopeful. So this is clearly something which is transatlantic in nature, and I think it's a very negative and very totalitarian approach that both governments seem to be taking.
Well, it's a window into what the governments really are, be it in the US or here in the UK, Mike. So at least this stuff is coming up to the surface. Any idea we're in a democracy is completely false now in 2025. And this is just another example of the sorts of pressures the state is going to put you under if you dare to disagree with the state. I think it's that simple.
Diane, let's finish then with a story from the Daily Mail.
Yeah, so this is something that a lovely UK column member sent to me early this morning. This was in the Daily Mail over the weekend about the Bilderberg meeting happening in Sweden right now. And it says that if you read the article further on, it sort of talks about how they infiltrated the 2018 Bilderberg meeting, the first time an undercover journalist ever managed to do so, gaining insights about the meeting's inner workings. Now, I think that our own Mark Anderson would have something to say about that because he's been covering the Bilderbergs for much longer than that. And even going back to Charlie Stilton, who covered the Bilderbergs for The Guardian starting in 2009. So I just thought it was a really, really kind of darkly funny example of one of the lies that mainstream media tries to put in front of us.
Yes.
Yeah, my comment on it is this is more signs of the mainstream media trying to adapt to look like new media. So they are sliding across. The BBC's doing this, Times Radio in particular, putting out material which has got a slightly amateur tinge to it because they are so desperately worried about the exposure. So I think there's a lot in that article, Diane. I think that brings us to the end of today's news. Diane, Mike, thank you very much for joining me. Huge thank you to our audience wherever you are in the world. And once again, a huge, huge thank you to everybody who's taken out membership and is helping to fund UK Column and help us do what we do. We couldn't do it without you. Thanks very much for joining us. Bye-bye.